and the new committee members. So with that, I'll close off this part and hand over to Kevin.
Thank you, Melissa. Hopefully everyone can hear me and everything is fine.
Yep.
So I'll start by introducing the three people that we're going to be speaking to today. So we have Phil Muston, who's joining us from Shirley Parsons, who I'm sure many people have heard of Shirley Parsons, the recruitment company, who's going to be our recruiter today to give us his perspective as a recruiter in the recruitment process. Jake, I'm going to say Moffat? I don't know, I've never said his surname out loud before. And Jake, who's joining us as a committee member, but also an employer for a well-known chain called Dominos, who's going to be our employer and give us the perspective as an employer in the recruitment process. And Stuart Joyce, who will be our employee, who has recently gone through the employment process himself to become an employee and works for me. So you can all take yourselves off mute. When and how you need to feel. I'll throw out some questions and we'll just sort of discuss as things go on. So, Phil, can you tell us what recruiters are looking for in potential candidates in the current market?
Yeah, to be honest, what we look for hasn't really changed over the 11 years that I've been here. I would say that experience and qualifications are almost a bit of a given, but what we really look for that stands out in the current, well, in any market conditions, is actually how someone interacts and engages with us. It's the first port of call when we speak to any prospective talent and candidates, that actually when we're engaging with our clients, the most important thing, and probably about 90% of what people hire, is the person. So that's really what we look for when we're having conversations and meeting potential candidates, is how they interact and engage with us, to be honest.
Yeah, brilliant. It's quite interesting. I think it does come up a lot. It's about that, making sure there's that good connection between the people that are actually coming up. Jake, so as an employer, what do you look for in potential employees, and how has that changed over the last 2 or plus years?
I think it builds on what Philip said, actually, to be fair. I don't think it has changed massively either. I've recruited two separate HC manager roles, so I'm relatively well versed in the last 18 months going through that as a line manager. So for me, it is that combination of experience, to a lesser degree qualifications, I'd more say competence, and then the kind of soft skills, the power skills. We'll probably get onto that later, but for me, the biggest kind of hurdle to find the right candidate is to get someone that can demonstrate leadership skills as well as technical skills. I think in some respects the leadership skills are more important than technical skills. Not for every company, but certainly in my experience, that's been a focus, and it's probably been a larger focus in the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 years than it was in the previous 5 years, just kind of the way things are going. And then obviously the increase in focus on sustainability, and all that brings with kind of broadening experience and input. We're at a stage where it's not a new concept, but it's a new hot topic, I guess. So there are not that many candidates will have demonstrable experience multi-year in that field. So what I would look for if that was important for the role I was recruiting, was a solid understanding of the current issues at play, where the industry is at the moment, where it's heading. So it's a broadened knowledge of the topic rather than demonstrable experience, and sadly I don't always see that. So it's certainly something for candidates to think about.
Yeah, Stuart, just to get the ball rolling, what do you look for in potential employers in the current market? What are the key
in the current market? Certainly top of my list now is probably the flexibility, the attitude of the employer towards hybrid working. We had this conversation actually this morning. It's something that I'm definitely looking for. Luckily, I have that where I am. My employer isn't demanding I'm going into London office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I'm going in and doing my sites, but I'm allowed to do reports from home. That is certainly something I'm looking for these days in the current market, is that flexibility, that willingness to be open to some hybrid working.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's something that I'm seeing a lot as well. So going back to Phil, how do recruiters support potential candidates through the recruitment process? What sort of process is going on there?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say the main thing that we do is that you almost appreciate that as part of our roles in the process is our role isn't just done by presenting profiles to a client. Actually, that's only the first part. Is that what we do with candidates is it's actually a full supporting process through, and appreciate that in this new way of working is some people have never done a Teams interview. Teams and Zoom interviews are now more prominent than ever before, and almost for us, we take on a coaching role and a supportive role in actually helping someone to prepare for an interview. And that's whether it be on a video call, whether it be face-to-face, and just hints and tips. And then even after that is our approach as careers consultants is actually, it's very linked onto what Stuart said, is that we're helping identify if it's the right opportunity for the candidate as well, because it's a two-way process. Is the client will have expectations on what they want from a candidate, but actually how we support the candidate is by understanding, do you know what, is this the right thing for you throughout the process? Because ultimately what we want to do is to support people to make long-term career decisions and not people move for the wrong motivations, say. So yeah, it's kind of the whole supporting piece through the interview, but then after that, supporting if it is right for them and providing our expertise, advice and guidance.
I think that's a really valid point, because in the remit I've got in Dominos is a couple of my team are actually site-based roles. They're factories on site, and other roles offer more flexibility. And part of the challenge I had was for the site-based roles, although it was advertised as site-based, a number of candidates, which is time, effort, and I imagine a degree of frustration from all parts. You'll get a certain way down the process for a candidate to then ask how many days would I typically be able to work from home. So I think it is really important, and I certainly, when I'm recruiting, make it abundantly clear in the advert and any initial communications that if it is a site-based role, there are generally reasons for it being site-based, and where it does allow flexibility to be quite clear. And I think I would make sure candidates are happy and comfortable in what they're applying for, and then everyone's clear. And just to your point around teams, I think that's one of the biggest changes through the recruitment process. So I did recruit before COVID, which was 100% face-to-face, and I've recruited during COVID, so in the last 18 months, and that was 100% virtual, which is quite strange when you meet the person first day in person is when they actually start. So you kind of hope that they roughly resemble the person you've been communicating with via Teams. But the amount of interviews via Teams, I mean, I've used Teams every day, so I'm well versed. The amount of Teams interviews that were cancelled either due to no one dialing in because they got the wrong dial-in link, or video not working, or you could see their forehead or their chest and nothing else type thing. It sounds silly, but if you're looking, if you want to be applying for roles and you got interviews coming up, don't underestimate the tech. And I would implore people to practice and do dummy runs, and then you'll be much less stressed or anxious ref the tech on the day.
Yeah, it's part of our preparation. Is very much that. It's the first part of anything when we talk about, especially video interviews, is preparation, and that is checking everything works. You've got a good environment. The amount of times that we've had people, and you've probably experienced it yourself, is when people dial into an interview and they're in their car and they're surrounded by loud noises. It's just not quite the right environment to give the best first impression. So no, I definitely agree with that. And
I don't know if I'll get told off by Kevin in a minute for talking too much. But the only other point to mention, we'll move on in a minute, is when you have the opportunity to interview face to face, you have ample opportunity to demonstrate your personal impact, both in the non-verbal and verbal setting. On a Teams call, you can still demonstrate your personal impact, but you've got to rely much more on the spoken word, as well as not being in a noisy environment. So I think it's again, it's how you position yourself there to come across as confident, articulate, clear, concise. When certainly in the beginning days of the pandemic, most people ended up babbling for a long time on Teams because it's a bit of an unfamiliar environment. Hopefully most people are now quite well versed in remote meetings, but it's be aware that you still want to try and demonstrate your personal impact. You just got to do it via a Teams or Zoom call, and you are slightly limited. Sorry, Kevin.
That's all right. It's good. It's definitely important. I think I agree completely. It's so important that in not even outside of the interview process, but definitely in there as well, is that this technology is becoming more and more apparent, and people need to get better at it. And it just doesn't give a good, no different than if you turned up to a meeting in a pair of shorts and flip flops. If you turn up and all you see is your forehead on a Teams meeting, it gives that impression that you don't know what you're doing. And competence is difficult to communicate to people, and little things like that can obviously all tick in quite quickly. So moving off then from the employee, what do recruiters do to work with employers to support them in finding the right candidate, Philip?
Yeah, so I'll say for us, I can only talk from a perspective of Shirley Parsons, is one thing that we really look is we kind of say that for us it's insights and expertise. So when I say insights, that is providing both talent and market insights. So one thing that anyone on here can access, if you go onto our website, we've recently completed a market survey in the industry to see what's happening in the market, to give people that insights. So the real thing that we do is following a discovery meeting with a prospective client to understand the requirement. Actually, what we do is the best support that we give outside of traditionally what our industry would do is actually advising what's going on out there, actually what's happening with salaries, with regions, with certain industries. And actually that's the part that we probably have the best access to that clients don't. Is Jake was saying when he was hiring, he probably didn't have as good a knowledge in the market and how salaries have gone up on average by 20% over the last couple of years, and the amount of candidates that are actually out there. So I'd say the real way that we support the most is by providing our expertise and insights into the market, I would say.
That's brilliant. And on the back of that, so how much influence do you think recruiters, and in your experience, Shirley Parsons as well, it's quite a big one, have on what employers are looking for in OSH professionals?
I think we have quite a lot of influence actually, but it depends how engaged the company and the hiring lead is in the process. So if a hiring lead is just looking for traditional CVs, a term that's probably thrown around is a bum on a seat, if you will, someone who just wants a job, actually we don't have as much influence, because what the person's looking for isn't a long-term hire decision. It's effectively someone to come in to fill a void. Whereas actually when we have the engagement, people buy into the insights that we provide and our expertise. Actually we have quite a lot of influence, because that's where we can, especially in the current market conditions, really steer a client to understand the timeframes, the speed in which people are being taken for other opportunities. And also with that insights, sometimes you have some clients that say, do you know what, they're brilliant, but I'd like to see someone else. And sometimes you say, okay, what that can mean we may lose this person. How would you feel if you lost this person? So I'd say that we do have quite a lot of sway and help, more so from our expertise and insights to provide what's going on out there, really.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's good to see that someone is actually giving them some good advice. And Jake, so what do you look for when you're deciding what experience and qualifications will, and what do you consider to be relevant qualifications and experience?
I think without trying to be a bit slopey shoulders, it really depends on the role. You know, in my example, I cover manufacturing, warehouse distribution, corporate, which is kind of the office side of things, retail, road safety. So it does very much depend on the role. But I think it's and the level to which it's benchmarked and what the role holder is expected to do. So I think a level of understanding and a formal qualification in health and safety would be great. It doesn't have to be, you know, NEBOSH diploma. It can be that there's many routes. And I'm certainly of an opinion, and again, it will be line manager and employer specific, that actually you don't have to have the diploma necessarily if you're willing to get to that point, if it's needed for that level of role. You know, the desire to onwardly progress would be equally suitable, and I've certainly not used that as a kind of a filtering exercise. So I think that's one point. But moreover, from the technical skills, for me, it's how the candidates demonstrate their leadership skills, their power skills. I think you know, it's no good just knowing, you know, every ounce of every regulation to recite off the top of your head. You need to be able to influence, engage, strategize, to come up with plans to actually affect change and make change stick. And that's how we improve the safety of the workforce. So I think I certainly major on candidates' experience in those soft skills and examples they can bring to the interview on how they can utilize their technical understanding in a practical application through their leadership skills.
Yeah, so you know, talking something I've heard from many different employers and different cycles about the same thing. Leadership, power skills is much more important than the technical qualifications, although qualifications can often be the thing that gets you through the door. How would you like to see, or how have you seen in the past, somebody demonstrate these leadership skills or these power skills during an interview process? Or is that something that you think maybe the employer should be working on when interviewing people, ways in which they can allow potential employees to show that? Or is that something you'd expect that they would come up and say, right, prove to me you've got leadership, go?
I think there's 2 points to this. Well, there's many points. There's two points off the top of my head here. I think when reading the job advert and looking into the company, and if you haven't done this, it's actually quite interesting, even if you're not in the job market. You can quite easily determine if an employer is after a pure technical role or if they actually are after a mix of technical and leadership. Most progressive organizations would be looking for a degree of leadership in any case. So let's assume that the employer is looking for a degree of leadership as well as the technical skills. I would expect a competent interviewer to want to ask questions around that. Now, if they're being, and I've done it in the past just to be challenging, it would be too easy for at an interview for an employer to say, can you talk to me about what your key leadership skills are? Because that's overtly obvious and it should be relatively easy to answer. But what candidates may find, and I've done this in the past, is use questions around the lines of, well, how would other people describe you? Or what would you say your greatest strengths are? Now, when you're thinking about those kind of questions, if you've deduced through discussion so far, the advert, the company, that a level of leadership skills is important, that's a great opportunity to give a non-technical example in response to that question. So, in responding to what do other people think of you, you could use that as a great platform to say, well, actually, I'm going to talk about my leadership style. My leadership styles, it will reflect on what people think of me. So you can then talk at length around your leadership style and how you approach situations. And then with your greatest strength, you could then major on how you've influenced and strategized to deliver a transformation program, and that could be a key strength of yours. I think some of the pitfalls, and certainly through my experience, the answer to those type of questions often is, I have the NEBOSH diploma and I've got a great technical understanding of workplace transport in a warehouse, which is great, but I don't know if that's a differentiator between the 10 candidates that might be vying for the position.
Definitely. So how much importance would you put on the cultural fit aspect of hiring people? Do you look at the teams they'll be joining or who they'll be working with to make sure that there's that cultural fit, or is it just going to be competency?
It's good. There was an article, and I forget where, on what magazine or what platform. There's probably been a few articles recently around, is it right to have, should employers be looking for a cultural fit, or in the true spirit of diversity and inclusion, should we be actually looking for non-cultural fits to provide an extra dynamic to the organization? I think the behaviors need to be in line with the organization's values. But from a cultural fit point of view, I think there's some merit in exploring all types of individual, because diversity of thought is one area of diversity. It doesn't just have to be age, gender, religion, etc. And diversity of thought often comes through in different approaches to situations and different cultural fits, if it were. So for me personally, I wouldn't be benchmarking someone's cultural fit on what we currently do. I'd be thinking about it in the wider remit of what do they bring to the team, and if that's actually different to what we've already got, that can be equally a benefit. And what I would say is, I think candidates should be true to themselves. You shouldn't force fit and try and pretend you really want to operate in culture X when the company's clearly saying it's culture Y. Or it might be that the company's saying culture Y and you're quite happy to flex, but you shouldn't have to change who you are.
That's great. Stuart, so when it comes to looking at jobs, how important is the salary in deciding if you will accept the role? And if it's not the most important thing, what is?
It is important, of course, but it isn't absolutely everything. Like I said on earlier, I could be going for two roles, but if one in the city was saying I had to come in to the office and work all my hours there and then do my commuting, whereas the other firm would be open to hybrid working, I would probably choose them.
It's a good point you make there, Stuart, because when I was talking about our market insight survey, which, as I say, anyone can access, is one of our questions was, what is the most important driver for you? Pre-COVID, salary was number one.
Yep.
Following COVID, salary is now number 4, and number 1 is flexibility, hybrid working, being able to work from home. So it's definitely understanding those motivations really and what a client really wants. And as Jake said, is understanding that from the first instance as well.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I mean, and then going back to culture there. So as an employee, how important when you're looking for places to work is that you feel you fit culturally within the company and its values?
For me, it is, I would say culture, I'm going to say attitude and behaviour. I like to work with like-minded people. In the past, going back years when I was doing manual labour, I worked for some pretty hard, ruthless people, lacking in morals, work you to death, no appreciation. So certainly in terms of that, working for like-minded people who appreciate the work you're doing and the effort, that's right up there in terms of important, yeah.
Oh, good. Hopefully you're getting all of that where you currently work. So,
yeah, pretty much.
Go back to Phil. So do you believe that the recruitment industry has a duty to ensure the sustainability of the health and safety job market? And what's Shirley Parsons doing to do this? I think you've sort of touched on that already with the things you were talking about.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, especially in the current market, is I would say the short-sightedness of individuals and businesses is because it is a very heavily candidate-driven market. We've seen salaries increase astronomical rates for, I think what businesses are looking at, they're looking at the cost to replace talent and then putting the wrong value on individuals and experience. So this is why we've done things such as our market survey, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to give people insights into the market so they see the wider picture. So we've had examples over the last couple of months where there's been candidates who have less than a year's worth of experience that have been offered positions at the 60 to 70k mark, which it's not a sustainable approach to continue for the long term. And what that does is actually, as I say, with the market insights, is a lot of people's motivations is the flexibility, and actually number 2 is progression, number 3 is cultural and behavioural fit, number 4 is salary. So what we're seeing is a lot of people are, from the candidate's perspective, are getting crazy money offered to them, and the short-sightedness of them taking it, knowing that in 12 to 18 months time they're going to be in the same situation to look to move on. But I totally appreciate, with the conditions that are out there in the world, with the cost of living, it is something that has to be taken into consideration. So I suppose what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide as much market insights and expertise and advice. And I talk about when we say when we put people forward for opportunities and we're talking to candidates and clients, is it has to be right for both. And sometimes you have to take a consultative approach and say, do you know what, this isn't right for you. Actually, what you're looking for is this. I don't believe this is the right client, and having that open, honest conversation both sides. So I would say from our consultative approach, it's about looking for people to make the best term, long-term career decisions, both from a hiring sense and them as an individual. So it's looking away from that transactional piece that we just need to find people jobs, and it's actually we're looking to provide people with the best career moves.
That's brilliant. So what do you think is the biggest challenge at the moment in recruitment?
I'd say that word I said is that
Yeah.
is that short-sightedness of both sides of the coin. That with there being more opportunities on the market than candidates, what we're seeing is the salaries are significantly increasing. One thing our market survey, it says that on average now, for someone to consider a move, they need a 16.3% pay increase, which is up over 10% from 2 years ago. So yeah, I would say that's the main challenge, and the main challenge is it's overcoming the the obstacles that we have, such as high increase in salaries, counter offers, and actually making candidates and clients really understand the motivations of what someone wants. And that's why when we provide when we talk about our talent insights, we've got a few tools that we use. One's called Roti, which is a personality profiling tool, which actually allows a candidate and a client to really understand what their motivations are. So I'd say the challenge is changing the minds of people when they are being presented with the wrong motivators. But with the current world conditions, I can understand how that is it is a driver. But from people's honest, open perspective, it is the fourth in the list, not the number one anymore.
So, bit question a bit off topic there, but so do you think that the job market, the way the salaries are going and how things are sort of inflating so drastically, do you think that there's going to be a crash in the future? Do you think that if it ever switches back to no longer being a candidate-driven market, that you might start finding people saying, well, actually, maybe we need to start bringing these salaries back down?
Yeah, I think what we will see is we'll see clients that in say 18 months to 2 years, when I believe it will kind of come back down to a level playing field, is they will see there will be ultimately, when you pay someone a high increase in salary or higher than you believe the expected rate to be, what comes with that is an expectation on someone will be able to deliver a higher quality or more work. Ultimately, until that person has the experiences to be able to do that, that's difficult. So I think what will happen is you will get a lot of employees that will become disgruntled that they aren't moving further forward, because progression was number 2 in the market insight survey. So even with these inflated salaries, people are always looking for that next step. And when that next step's not there, what you'll see is you'll see people that will return to the old motivators, and it'll be the flexibility, like Stuart said, it would be the progression, and actually you'll have candidates that will say, I'll consider less salary to get the motivations that I want. So I think I think it will start to come down, but I think it really needs to be a switch in the attitude of people when they realize that the main motivators for looking for a new opportunity haven't been met even with the money, and then actually they'll then look to reduce what they're on. But I think it will, as it's increased, I don't think we'll ever go back to what it was. Cost of living and everything going up, naturally the costs of salaries will go up, but I think it will come down from where we're seeing currently.
The future is bright. So Jake, going to sustainability as well. As an employer, how important is sustainability as a competency for those that you're employing? Do you think it's become much more important? I know we talked on this earlier.
Yeah, not huge, not much else to really add other than I think it's certainly emerging. It will depend on the employer and the role that is being recruited for. Again, it goes back to my comment about reading and being clear on what the role is that's being advertised. So some roles will major on it more so than others. I definitely think as we move forward in the future, sustainability will have an increasing focus and an increasing inclusion in role profiles and adverts. So I think it is role dependent, advert dependent, and I'd almost guarantee that it will become much more prevalent. And I think it's that slight paradox at the minute where, because it's an emerging theme as a kind of hot topic, that there won't be swathes and swathes of candidates that've got multi-year experience delivering in this area, but it's the knowledge of the general groundswell and what the industry is doing. So, and it certainly will increase as we move forward in the future.
Oh, brilliant. And what do you think the biggest challenge facing recruitment at the moment is? What challenges are you facing as an employer?
I think Phil's pretty much summarised it really. My own personal challenges when I have been recruiting, not in the distant past, weren't necessarily really salary or culture or flexibility, because we were quite clear on that and had everyone was clear in the process. It was finding candidates that would answer the interview questions in a way that shows their leadership and power skills, even when prompted. So I think that's we've certainly moved away from the pure technical aspect that we've talked about through this discussion so far. And again, in this example, it was made abundantly clear within the advert almost second bullet point type thing around proven ability to lead and influence change, as an example. So for me, that was the biggest and the greatest challenge in finding the right candidate was finding a candidate that could demonstrate their power skills.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, definitely these conversations about these things, it seems that there needs to be something generally going out that sort of shows ways of being able to prove those. I know my experience from both sides, it can be a very challenging thing. It's easy to prove technical skills. It's difficult to prove power skills, especially in a short time frame, and figure out how that's going to sort of work out.
Yeah, when we talk about, just quickly on that, when we're doing all the preparation with candidates prior to interviews, what we say is think of strong examples. And one thing that, especially for the leadership part, is that what I'm sure clients will find and candidates will find when they interview is that people are very quick to be modest and say we, us, all those kind of things, where actually what the feedback usually comes is, they were part of it, they didn't lead it. So what we always say is, and this is where the video call becomes so brilliant over face-to-face, is that we say, you've got all this space that no one can see. Have it ready that you can just glance left, right, up, down, around, and people just think you're just having a little moment away from the eye contact. But actually what you can do is you can give really strong examples of what you did and how you did it and how you influenced and engaged. And that's part of our preparation, to give someone we never do it to give people the answers. What we do is we give them as much information, as much guidance as we can, so they have the tools to perform in the best light, because you only get one shot. And sometimes people come out and they go, oh, I wish I'd said that. So that's why we do it. But a little tip for anyone on the call, if you're having a conversation, just have a little post-it note on the side here that you can just refer to any sort of scenarios. But that's part of the preparation that I think a lot of people need, and you take for granted that someone who's been in a position of power and leadership is able to call upon that just a click of the fingers, whereas actually some people need to prepare a lot more.
That said, when I'm speaking to mentees, I talk about the stars and writing down their stars, and with videos, it's very easy to effectively have them all listed down somewhere, so you've always got something that you can sort of refer to. And hopefully, I'm interested, I guess, to see how that might change the future of how interviews go when you can have all that preparation. And I think, to be fair, if they ask you a technical question and it's a Teams, it depends how quick you are with Google, but probably take like 30 seconds to get an answer if you nudge away for a bit.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So Stuart, it's okay talking about it. What was the reason you started looking for a new job the last time, or reasons that you would look for a new job from your own experience?
Last time was being undervalued, working probably double the hours I was getting paid for. Just a lack of appreciation again, really. That did it. I wanted to move on. Luckily, so far at Metropolitan, yeah, much better.
And although I know the recruitment process was unique for you, how have you found recruitment in general throughout your career?
I've only really spoken to recruiters while in health and safety, but I can honestly say I've had a couple of really good experiences with them. That's coming down from being very open about salary expectations, going into more depth on the job role over the phone, and then, like it's been mentioned on here before, coaching for the interviews. Having those notes, putting on that nice shirt, making sure you're not in a car, taking the call, nice office or whatever, just good tips, good setup. Yeah, I've had good positive experiences with recruiters.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I obviously hosting this as well. I'm quite a fan of recruiters in the process. I do think that they're worth the costs that tend to be involved in the process. And I know there's looking at some of the questions that have come up that we'll probably definitely pick out on how those costs affect the process itself as well. So final question before we go on to questions and answers, back to Jake, as if he's got any advice for candidates looking for their next role.
Two bits of I am conscious of time, so I think two snippets I'd say. Avoid self-limitation is my first bit of advice, and by that I mean, and I use my own example of recruiting. Don't always feel that you have to tick every single item of an advert or role profile that's posted. I've actually, the most recent recruit in my team actually didn't meet one part of the role spec. They were very, very competent in other areas. They had a willingness to increase their knowledge and complete further training, and more importantly, they actually blew it out of the park with their examples of how they've influenced throughout an organization and delivered transformational change. So that's the reason that they actually got the role. There were other candidates in the interview process that met every single bullet point on the advert, the role profile, but they didn't come across as strongly on the desire and those power skills. So I would implore everyone, don't self-limit yourself. It's always, if you think you can do the job, it's always worth reaching out and speaking to a recruiter or applying. I think self-limitation in all walks of life is a burden on all of us. So don't self-limit. And the second bit I would say is think of what is your USP? What's your differentiator between you and the other however many candidates that are being interviewed, and I would then tailor that to the kind of the sense of culture / role that you're applying for. So that, what is the company actually looking for? And it go without sounding like a broken record. If it's clear that there's a level of leadership needed, that might be a good differentiator if you've got some really strong examples, rather than I've got an IOSH diploma, because it's most likely that every candidate you're up against has got similar technical qualifications, and unless you have a superstar technical qualification, it's an extremely technical role. But more broadly speaking, it's more likely to be your leadership skills or some real meaty examples of where you've influenced and driven change and implemented systems, et cetera. So think about what makes you unique versus everyone else, and be prepared with a couple of strong examples to back that up. And if the question isn't asked during the interview, what is your USP? As I said right at the beginning, always think creatively how you can kind of shoehorn that answer into a general question about, tell me about yourself, or what is a great strength, or how would someone else describe you? You could always say, well, actually, this is my, I think I stand out because my unique selling point or my greatest strength is, and then you can shoehorn it in, and you only get that through strong preparation. So there's my 2 tips.
Thank you, Jake. We've got a few questions coming in. Most of them are going to be aimed at Phil.
Sorry.
I will just go through them as they come in. So when engaging with a recruitment agency, is there associated costs for the candidate? I know the answer to that, but you can answer.
No, nothing. Every service we provide to the candidate is free of charge on the candidate side. Nothing. So that would be, and that isn't always us finding them a new opportunity. We provide advice on CV, LinkedIn coaching, interview coaching. No, there's no cost towards the candidate at all.
And I can step with that. I've worked with Shirley Parsons for years and years and years, and they've always been great people to sort of just literally, you can literally just contact them. If you just want to talk about your career and talk about what you want to do, and they're great sort of advices, and their roti was a fun little thing to get into that I'm going to start spreading around myself to some of my mentees. Those wasn't on the question. It's something that actually came up a few days ago that someone asked me when I was talking about recruiters. And it was whether because of the cost to the client in the recruitment, does that affect the salary? That they would then, if they're using a recruiter, they can't offer as high as a salary because they have to then pay the recruiter. My answer was not that I've seen, but is that something that you've seen or you think might be?
No, not at all. I think it's an interesting question that people think, well, if they're paying you so and so, does that mean they can't afford? No, because actually the best way I describe it is different budgets. Is that a lot of companies, big and small, will have an external recruiting budget, a hiring budget, whereas actually a budget on someone's salary, that more comes out of their people plan, their HR budget. So no, I've never had in my 11 years experience someone lower a salary because there is a fee encompassed. Ultimately, the reason there's a fee to be paid is because they're paying us as consultants for an expertise. If you were paying, So no, I've never experienced that, but people have asked me that question. I think it's because it's perceived that in contract a chunk is taken out, but again, it's the other way around. A margin is added. So yeah, there's never anything taken away from the candidate side from us. Brilliant.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, and I don't think I'll be able to answer particularly well. It's an international question. So from an international applicant, asking within screening applications from international applicants, what is the criteria that is chosen, and what is best for an international applicant to get shortlisted for an interview, with them having chartered IOSH membership?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get approached quite a lot on a daily basis by international candidates, and the best advice that we can give is that there is always opportunity, but we are, as a business, limited to what our clients are able to do. So I usually ask the question is, what is their eligibility to work in the UK without sponsorship? If they have eligibility, they have an ancestry visa, however it may be, we can definitely engage with them. If they do require a company to sponsor them, what we will do is we'll speak to the client we're supporting and ask if that is an option. Unfortunately, probably only about 5 to 10% of companies at present are willing to sponsor international applications. Usually the first initial thing the client says is, I want to explore what local talent we have first, but there is opportunity. It's just, it isn't as often. But what we do have in Shirley Parsons, we're an international business, so we have international offices that support. We've recently opened up an office in Taiwan, for example. We've got offices in Germany, so if we have European or anyone over towards Asia or even Africa that is interested, we can pass them to the relevant office to support with more local recruitment, if that makes sense.
Hi, Kevin, can I ask a question here? Kind of just following up with what Philip has just said.
Yes.
It kind of ties in. I was listening to a webinar, as I normally do, and they were talking about the fact that hybrid, and therefore with hybrid working, you can now your pool of candidates is now international. Have you all seen more of those? So I'm just going back to the international person who might be based outside of the UK, don't have to be at a site in the UK. Has there been more roles in that kind of remit?
We're starting to see a lot more. I specialised in construction, civil engineering, and it was always before COVID seen as you had to be on site. COVID taught a lot of those businesses a lesson in how they can change their approach. We are starting to see some businesses that are interacting with international employees remotely. It's still taking a little bit of time because there still is that little bit of, well, we would like them to be maybe here once a week, twice a week. We're not seeing 100% external roles, remote roles, sorry. We are starting to see ones where it is more focused on the system side. But again, we're starting to see a shift, but not as big a shift as we're seeing to hybrid working within the UK at the moment.
Yeah, and I think this is tied into like what Tim had posted, actually. I think, Tim, that's your question around if there are remote roles in the UK now. Yeah. It's
an interesting point, isn't it? Because when, I'm Dominos, obviously you'll know it for pizza, but actually it's basically a digital company that happens to sell pizza rather than a pizza company. So I do know that if this was a webinar around recruiting developers in the IT sphere, then there are fully remote roles where really, other than working patterns and time of day you work, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. But within the occupational safety and health profession, it's in a large number of cases, I don't know if it's all of them, but a vast majority, there is a need and a benefit to having some form of physical presence, to have that influence, that coaching, that engagement. That how effective would we be as a profession if we were fully remote? It's a question, it's not a statement, which I think is where you see quite a bit of hybrid, but I've not seen very many at all fully remote roles. And I wonder if it's partly due to that actually you do need some face-to-face physical contact time. You do need to observe and monitor and coach in person. And I don't think that's ever going to go away.
No, I'd agree. I'd say it's what our clients, you're a client, you're a hiring lead. It's what we're hearing as well, is that the flexibility in remote working is now very much offered, but there is that we would like a presence at points, and that's where the international remote becomes a lot more difficult. But we are seeing it very similar with the IT digital. You say we're starting to see it on the system side, where they are more 100% from home and don't require to go out. We are starting to see a little bit more on that.
Kevin, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. I had to plug in my charger. I don't want to be rustling around as I run with my bag. I'm reading some of the questions. I'm not exactly sure what is being asked. So if they're still on the call, a question around a passing comment about helping candidates fund long-term career options, and has the recruitment process, advice for applicants and employers changed? and unlike their generation for 3 or 4 decades working for one employer throughout their career, short-term contracts and moving on to something new more frequently is more common. There's a question mark, but it sounds more like a statement, so I'm not sure what the question is, unless I'm just misreading it. If you're still on the call, you can unmute yourself and just ask.
I think that was me.
Okay.
Sorry about the confusion. Yeah, I mean, I was just looking back over, my generation. I'm looking at Tony and perhaps Kurt, but we spent most of our time working in one role overall for one employer. Tony moved on, but we were long-term civil servants, and that isn't the practice now. And I was just really thinking, I mean, that's what the purpose of this whole session is about. Is getting away perhaps from that ethos. It's not, one job for life anymore. But how do you approach that? I asked a supplementary question really about tailoring individuals and looking to. It was just because the word long-term career was mentioned, and I don't see that now as an option anymore.
No, yeah, it's definitely changed since before me, unfortunately, is that people would be in a career for a long time with one employer, and there was a period where that was seen as a bit of a stigma. Is that they've only done something one way? Are they really wanting to move? What we're seeing now is that. So our market insight survey shows that on average, when someone gets to 2 to 3 years within their current position, that's when they start to think about the next move. And that could be down to multiple things. That could be down to not being happy, the market conditions, someone's approaching them, whatever it may be. But what we're seeing is employers previously used to not want people who have jumped around. But actually what we've seen is during COVID and prior to that is actually the average stay for someone within the current position is 2.5 years. So we've kind of got past that jumpy CV being seen as a bad thing. What we're starting to see is almost the flip side, is that with what's happened in the world, is that if someone has shown that loyalty to a business for a long time, is seen as a good thing, that loyalty from an employer. When I talk about long-term career decisions, is that we're here to support candidates to find new opportunities and career moves. Is that what we moved away from a long time ago is so we don't use the word recruitment anymore. We use the word careers consultant, because actually what we look to do is to support people to find an opportunity where they can grow their career, rather than a job for someone who in 6 months to 12 months time they'll be looking at. I'll give you an example. I was speaking to a client only yesterday, and they've had a few in the past. They've had a few poor hires, and they said, "Oh, it's great for businesses like you because you get to replace someone every 6 months." But actually, for us, that's not a good thing. That's not seen as a success. Actually, being a careers consultant, we look to support people from the day they get into the industry to ultimately the day they retire, and support them through every step of their career. So when I talk about long-term career decisions, is sadly in the current world, a long-term career decision is really only 3 to 5 years, but as long as we are making sure it ticks those motivators, and it isn't just the money box, if that makes sense. It ticks the progression. Stuart mentioned the flexibility. So it's making sure it's the right decision for all parties is when I talk about long-term career decisions. But taking your point with 3 to 4 decades ago, when people spent their whole career, that's not seen as a bad thing at all at the moment. With the shortage of talent, it's actually just looking for the best suited person, as Jake said, with as long as they can exhibit the right softer skills.
Yeah, I'll just come back on that if I may quickly, Jake. And I mean, just to clarify, 30, 35 years, 40 years in the civil service doesn't mean you've been doing the same job. And I held about 10 different roles, I suppose, with nominally different employers within that definition. So, I think, Tony moved on to what was the railway inspector and then ORR. So we've all done different things and worked in different industries. It's a bit of a misnomer that it's a job for life, really.
Yeah, of course.
In the civil service. So,
I think, Alan, that's probably going to be probably the bigger difference. It's probably not so much that employees have changed; employers have changed.
Yes.
That role doesn't exist anymore. If you work at the same company for 40 years, you'd be on about 30 to 40% less salary and had no progression for 30 of those years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so same thing, I'd look at career, as a personal perspective. to me, a career is not an employer or a place that you work. It's a personal thing that you take with you from one place to another. And the specific place that you work is just sort of, it's a step on that journey. And if that journey continues with the same employer, especially if it's a good employer, great. But especially in such a niche market like health and safety in places that it's unlikely that the people that tend to be long terms, they're the people who've already reached senior roles, and they can happily sit there in their senior role for the next 20 to 30 years. Because there's only one single senior role in that company, anyone who wants to work a senior role in that company is going to have to then go and work somewhere else. And it's sort of, that progression has to work that way in most industries.
It is interesting. The approach in the civil service and health and safety executive was to move individuals on within that sort of 5 years, that time scale that Philip mentioned, in 3 to 5 years. It tended to be a bit longer. That was limiting in some ways when individuals were just getting those technical skills to be specialists, getting moved on to another sector. That was where I came from. But I understand why we have this title of this whole session, Modern Recruitment. So even though recruitment isn't the word that Philip uses. So I'll let others ask their questions now, Jake. Sorry.
We're out of time now anyway. If we have the names and details of the other questions, or I'm able to, we can send them to Phil and Stuart and Jake, and they can answer the questions off the webinar.
Definitely.
Good. Kevin, that's your closing out there?
Yes, that's me closed out.
Okay, good. Well, I just want to say thanks so much, Kevin, for facilitating this session. Great job. As I said, I love when different committee members take on different roles, and we try to rotate, different people leading our branch meeting. So thank you. Special thanks to Philip, Stuart, and Jake for your participation as well. It's a really good conversation in terms of I think right now there has been a huge demand for the health and safety professional, which is excellent. We hope that continues. I'm hoping, I understand the point around, it's not sustainable, the kind of high increases we've seen, but I have strong views around compensation of HSE professionals relative to other professions, but I would not go into my rant at this moment. So I am hoping it stays high because it needs to be. But a really good conversation. Thank you for the tips and the experiences and advice you all have provided. Again, thanks everyone for staying on. The good thing is that this has been recorded, so we will post it on YouTube, as Tony has shared. So it's going to be made available for everyone and for persons who weren't able to attend. And again, just a reminder to continue to follow us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, visit our microsite, and you'll see the mailer coming out. And we look forward to having continued engaging conversations, insightful conversations, but also other activities, as Tim has mentioned, to enhance our member engagement and experience. So with that, we will close off this month's meeting, and we look forward to speaking to you all in May again. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, but do follow us anyway. It's great to have seen so many.